Hey Mark, thank you for being on the show here. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right, I thought that we should probably start from a high level because you probably like seen so many remodelers and in their businesses and trying to grow. I'd really be interested in your thoughts on what you. I've heard you say this before that bigger is not always better. That better is better, but what does better actually look like in a remodeling business?
Yeah, so the reason I have, kind of coined that little phrase quite a bit is that I find remodelers oftentimes get all giddy and excited about bigger projects. And they think at least that that's kind of the holy grail and that's where the success is they get bigger projects. And the reality is that it's kind of more like a target, like a shooting target, and in the red is the bullseye. And the real question is, what is your bullseye? What is the right size project? And if you do some analysis in your business, you can determine the right size project based on your competencies, based on your level of profitability, based on your client demographic, all of those kind of things. And oftentimes, that right size project, let's just use round numbers. If you're a design build firm, might be $200,000 is the right size project for you. So the idea that you're landing a whale or $1 million project or a $500,000 project, is kind of almost like having a shark swim into the net. And therefore, you've got to change that paradigm. You've got to get out of your head that bigger is not better, better is better. So I cannot emphasize enough, Sebastian, the amount of times I'm kind of reeling people back in when they're all giddy and excited about, having a real big project that, really questioning them on it. And, oftentimes they're a little bit disappointed or disillusioned by my comments, but that's really the whole spirit of that little statement.
Amazing. Just to unpack that a little bit, what does that look like in practice? Like just a part of knowing your numbers and knowing what project is a good fit.
Well, again, without, I'm a big believer in, try to keep it simple, stupid. So if you go back, for example, the last 3 to 5 years in your business and you have a list of all those projects that you would have done, it's fairly easy to be able to say, okay, did I end up with a delighted client on all those projects? What was my gross profit margin on all those projects? Did I finish the projects on time? How did the team feel about it in terms of, a certain degree of craftsmanship and pride, all those kind of things. And when you look at that analysis, it will really be able to determine, okay, there are some patterns. And those patterns are probably like I go back to the kind of what that sweet spot is. And then if you can determine that my real sweet spot, for example, is a upper middle class client. Household income is this. This is the kind of house values. This is what professions my clients have. This is what they eat for breakfast. Just in general, the more you can know about those after doing a little bit of analysis of your existing client base, it can start to really tell you, okay, well, in this type of firm, I'm really, really good at these kinds of projects, and therefore let me go and market and find those kind of, put the right lure, so to speak, on the line, and go out and get that type of fish to be able to come in, and it just is likely you're going to be a lot more successful and healthier.
Yeah, I see this as you say that. I feel like that sounds a lot like a specialization and niching down, which across across industries, I've seen that people are kind of afraid of actually kind of niching down. Do you find that that's the case in remodeling
I
as well?
think a little bit, again, the more laser focused that you can be. I mean, one of the things oftentimes when I'm coaching or giving a talk or something, I said, the real question is why do businesses fail, not succeed? Why do they fail? And I find that there's really three things. One is that lack of focus, and that's, is it a laser focus or a wide angle focus? Just that lack of focus is why they fail. Second is commitment. Again, you've got to be committed to what you're focused on, and not, again, let all the other distractions kind of pull you away and be less committed. And then third is the right amount of energy and capital. So whether it's marketing dollars or whether it's actually your time putting into finding those right clients, and staying focused on those three things. So that level of focus, I think, yes, you could call it a little bit more specialization. I would just say, know who you are and what you do best. And as I said, even that earlier statement, better's better, not bigger's better. So just make sure you can define better.
Exactly. And in your experience, where do you think remodelers most hit the ceiling when it comes to those three things, like lack of focus, commitment, and energy in capital?
Um, I, I'm not sure, it's so much hitting the ceiling as much as it is that they, let's say if there's multiple people involved in the business, when I say commitment, that means everybody has to be aligned. Everybody's got to care about the same thing. When I say focus, it's very hard. It's kind of like a juggler. You give me, you know, three balls, I can probably juggle them. You give me seven, they all end up on the floor. So, you can't focus if you've got, too many variables happening kind of together at one time. And on the last one being capital, sometimes capital is money, sometimes capital is time. And you've got to put in the right calories, time, and if you need to invest into certain things, you need to put in the amount of money. And that's so.
Completely, completely. And why do you think some remodelers consistently attract those better projects? Do you think it has to do a lot with these three things, and others kind of like are stuck with like less ideal jobs?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you can just be a little discriminating, especially in times of abundance, and to do more of those projects, I think in the remodeling business, right or wrong, birds of a feather flock together. And, so therefore, if I am doing three or four of the same kind of projects for different clients, I'm going to become known as doing that type of project. And I think there's a natural kind of a magnet that creates for you in terms of getting more of those leads and opportunities. But I think again, you can, if you go out and get your messaging right and you get out and, be spending time and energy and you know how to ask for referrals from your existing client base, you can get more of those more of the right projects swimming into the net. But again, I go back to what I've kind of conveyed so far, and that is, and I see this as a misconception with a lot of remodelers, is that they don't think of themselves necessarily as, okay, I'm really not only specializing, but this is my sweet spot that I'm especially good at. They tend to, chase after anything and everything that flows in the door.
Exactly, and that goes back to the energy and capital and time commitment. That kind of like goes into that as well. Um, so now, speaking about more about like the homeowner buying journey, do you think it has changed much in the last 5 to 10 years?
Um, yeah, I would say it has pretty dramatically. If you look back, and there's been a lot of data that's been looked at with this. Um, that I think is important. I think 15, 20 years ago, I'm going to go back a little bit further, you know, when a homeowner was contacting you, they were only about 20% of the way through the journey. Now they're about 80% of the way through the journey when they're contacting you. And that's in large part, obviously, because of technologies, and I think that while, the internet, I read 6, 9 months ago from an expert, he said it took 20 years to get full adoption of the internet, but with AI, it's only 2 years of full adoption. So the speed at which all that's happening today is so fast. It is changing, I think, the homeowners' kind of buying process. It's changing their planning process. It's changing even their level of control in the process. So it's changing, yeah, pretty dramatically. And I think those remodelers that are kind of behind the wave are going to fall short, and those that are, at least sensitive to this, I think moving forward are gonna do well. One of the things I feel pretty strongly is that remodelers need to position themselves with their prospects and clients as the AI tour guide or AI advocate or aggregator, because the reality is homeowners, maybe it's just starting right now that homeowners are leveraging, going to chat or going to Claude or Gemini or others. But the reality is a lot of times they're showing up to the party, with the design and direction on the project that is very, very foreign to what the remodelers used to. I mean, that's part of the service that they provide is, advice and direction and design and insights and all those things. And a lot of times now, and more homeowners are showing up to the party with, at least in their mind, a lot of those things sorted through. So, I think that the remodeler has got to become more masterful of those. Not necessarily a a technology geek, but they got to become more masterful at AI and those things so that they can head off at the pass and really early on in the relationship with a client say, this is who we are in this remodeling intelligence kind of conversation, and let us show you some of the things that we can do, leveraging AI, and how, if in fact you know how to put the right prompts in, you're not going to either get mistakes or you're not going to get, incorrect information. So therefore, I think how the remodeler positions themselves in that food chain moving forward, I think is really important.
And specifically, how could a remodeler, what steps do they need to take to position themselves as the aggregator of AI?
Well, I think first and foremost, and then you start, AI is happening fast, and it's, it is the topic right now. So therefore, invest time in, bringing your proficiency with AI and your knowledge, not up to expert level, but up to enough level that you're not going to embarrass yourself. And therefore, what does that mean? Okay, I'm going to spend, whatever. I'm going to make appointments to myself three days a week for 1 hour, and I'm gonna in that 1 hour I'm going to be uber focused of learning about what others are doing, playing around with it, imagining yourself as a client. What kind of prompts would I put in, and what kind of results could I get? What are some of the different tools that are out there that I might, at least create, some expertise on. And again, I don't think you have to, especially with, AI in particular. It's not like other technologies where or other programs and things where you just have to, immerse yourself. You can just dabble and get enough knowledge that you're quite useful. I lead some remodeling groups and of relatively small remodeling companies. And they've gotten out of the comfort zone and into the place where they're dabbling with it themselves. And they're like kids in a candy store learning about what it's able to do and making certain efficiencies within the business, but also they're doing some interesting things, in terms of visualization and and getting specification information and costing information and all kinds of things that could be what their clients are doing too.
Exactly. Yeah, I've heard I watched a channel from a remodeler that kind of what his perspective was that AI should not necessarily be um, client facing, but it should be part of like your what could the term was somehow like a utility for you because it makes the process and the time that you take for a lot of things in your business, it kind of like shrinks it down to like 10 or 20% of what it used to be.
Yeah, I think that's true, but I will say, Sebastian, of the literally hundreds of remodelers I interact with and talk to, 95% of them are looking at, okay, how do I use AI as an efficiency or as an effectiveness tool, just like what you're describing, and only 5% are the client facing. In my opinion, the winners in the future are the ones that are focusing on the client side. The efficiency side will come. Okay, if I to ask AI to do something for me and I can do it in in literally seconds versus researching it in 20-30 minutes, clearly I've got efficiencies that are happening and I need to do those kind of things. However, where the real mastery is going to be on the client facing side of it, and that is how do I control the client? I mean, what we've learned in this industry for the last 50 years is the person controlling the process wins the deal, and if you allow the client to control the process, you probably are going to fall short. So if you position yourself in these, I'm not trying to be, clever with my, AI tour guide or, AI authority or remodeling intelligence expert, any of those kind of things. I'm just trying to get in people's head that you have to focus on that side of the equation. And right now, like I said, 95% are looking at it as a tool and can I become more efficient? And that's fine. However, don't forget about the client side because there's as I talked about in one of my episodes of my podcast, Remodeling Mastery, is that there's a client, there's a fellow I worked with in Texas that called me and says, I lost 20% of my business. And I said, oh my goodness, what happened? And he said, yeah, I lost it to AI. And I said, what do you mean? He said, just what I've been describing. Clients, they took and looked at their concepts and design and say, oh, this is all nice, ran it through a whole bunch of different AI filters, came up with better ideas, came up with better specifications, a better, more packaged costing on the project. And they went back to my friend and said, gosh, I like you a lot, but I just don't see the value in working with you guys. And that's at the end of the day, people proceed because they see the value being greater than the cost. And therefore, if you don't see the value there, then you're going to lose more and more projects. And unfortunately, you're going to lose them to AI. And
Yeah,
AI is
I
not going to screw lumber in, or not. AI is not going to install drywall, but AI can do what the remodeler does, probably, whatever, 50% of all that. So if I don't get the value of all that deep expertise and knowledge, I've got the benefit of that intelligence in a different way, then it's going to have an influence. And it's going to be disruptive. I mean, imagine, for example, going to a doctor and the doctor is, got deep experiences in giving you a good advice. And then you as a patient are saying to the doctor, yeah, I understand that, but what about? And 90% of that may be irrelevant stuff, but it's going to be very disruptive to that doctor who's allowed, whatever, 10 minutes for that visit to now be answering an hour worth of questions.
Yeah, I actually saw or actually I listened to that episode from your podcast of the gentleman that lost that lost his those projects to AI, and that's actually a really good segue into what signals do remodelers need to give homeowners so that they feel confident enough to move forward with a larger project and investment in this age of AI?
Um, when you say what signals, can you expand on that a little bit?
So you were saying that, for example, this gentleman lost business to AI, and how does a remodeler position themselves? Well, we talked a little bit about that before, but how does a remodeler position themselves to be trustworthy towards towards the homeowner in an age where the homeowner is way more informed and has, as you said, 80% of the way done.
Yeah, I mean, my advice, and honestly, Sebastian, we're figuring this out because it's all relatively new, but based on my kind of diving into the deep end of the pool on this, or this AI pool, my advice would be, number one is try to have the conversation with homeowners early. And the conversation might be as simple as, so Sebastian, tell me a little bit more about the research that you're doing on this project. That's a legitimate question. It's no different than a doctor says, well, why do you think this? What kind of research have you done? And then if you listen carefully, then it's probably a good segue into the kind of research that they've done. Are they leveraging AI? Because nowadays, they will tell you right out of the gate that, yeah, I've run it through the AI filter. I put these prompts and questions in, and this is what it's coming back and telling me. So that tells me the person at least is putting their toe in the water. They may not be up to their neck in it, but their toe in the water on it. So then I can then go on from a conversation point of view and say, well, AI is out there. It's a universe of knowledge. We've positioned ourselves, with AI as being kind of your advocate and your tour guide with AI. Have you been working with chat, or do you go with Gemini or Claude, or you might name drop a couple of the other kind of platforms? And they'll more times than not say one thing. And then you can go on to say, so, what we find is that by aggregating all of those together, we can find where it's correct and incorrect. Because if there is a couple of common denominators, if you go down with AI too narrowly, is that number one, it makes mistakes. And I can give you an example of what some of the mistakes are. And those mistakes can be very, very costly and very dangerous. The other thing is that oftentimes, because of the inputs that it's drawing from, it's not necessarily truthful. It kind of lies sometimes, not intentionally, because it doesn't have that kind of intentionality, but it does lie. So we're positioning ourselves in this new world order here as being, as being the person. So let me show you an example of that, Mary and John. And I might show them a little case study where we did this, and here's how we did this. Or even more relevant is, let me take a couple of photographs of your kitchen or your kitchen with the window, and let me run it through an AI filter right now as we speak and ask AI to show us visually what something could look like if we made certain modifications. Because, most homeowners are visual thinkers, and therefore they do much better. You've heard the adage before, a picture's worth 1,000 words. So let me just show you, and I'm going to leverage AI right now, right in front of you. So you can tell from my little bit of role play that what I'm doing is I'm grabbing the steering wheel, I'm grabbing the reins, right? And I am taking control of it as opposed to letting it control me. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. And if you could, as a last question, if you could expand on like you said something about like the dangers of using AI, or the mistakes that it can make that could be costly. If you can expand on that, just as like to caution people when using AI.
Yeah, so again, I think getting off kind of role play and more just practically, anybody that leverages AI at all, which I do a little bit, but not hugely, like maybe some people, know that it sometimes makes mistakes. On a very practical note, and this has less to do with remodeling. In a very practical note, last summer I was doing kind of a endurance kayak experience. And it was through part of the experience, which was a 1 day experience, was through a particular canal. And this canal was fairly large, fairly long. It was about a 5-6 mile canal. So I wanted to go on to AI and determine what the ebb and flow, which way was the water flowing, right? So I could determine which time I would need to get there, so I'm not rowing upstream the whole time, I'm more rowing with the stream. Well, I put it into chat and asked what I thought were all the right questions. The bottom line, I got to the entrance of the canal because I was already 50% through my journey at that point. And the first, I would say, half a mile, it was correct. But the next 4.5 miles, the tide had changed and I was rowing upstream. So I don't know whether my prompt was slightly wrong, but the bottom line is it made a mistake, and the whole journey ended up taking me about an hour and a half longer because of it. So, and we see this with questions about cabinets. We see this about questions about availability of certain products. Like AI will tell you this is the best solution, and then you really drill into it and look at the availability of a particular product, and it's been discontinued for the last 3 years. So you got to know and continue to know what the right prompts are to really have more accurate information. And what's interesting is what I find remodelers doing right now more than anything is they are aggregating, multiple AI platforms together. That they're having chat go and compare Claude, go and compare or validate Gemini with each other. And as a result of that, it's at least allowing better information. Now, having said that, I don't think your typical homeowner is going to go into leveraging AI to make sure it's not making mistakes. They're going to get ideas and they're going to get insights. They're not going to be putting all the calories into, making sure it's correct, or taking this hundreds of years of experience from their team and weaving it into AI to ultimately come up with the best solutions.
Completely, yeah. Definitely something to
It's
look
a
out
it's a
there.
very interesting time. As much as I know we're having the conversation, and I'm kind of obviously the guest and somewhat expert, but I'll be the first to say, 6 months from now, it's going to be so different than it is right now. So it's even tough because of the speed of all this to really know how you or position yourself, other than this little metaphor I sometimes use, not only with this but other things, is that you want to be in the wave. And I spend time over at the shore kind of watching the waves a lot in the Atlantic Ocean there. And when I'm watching those waves, I watch the surfers. I watch the people, the body surfing or with surfboards, and those that are, that they're watching that wave carefully, right? And they can tell by the colors within the wave, whether they can get into the wave at the right time and then flow right through, or they miss it and they fall behind, or they get crashed by it and hurt. So I know it's very hard with this AI metaphor to completely get your head around that. But, I strongly encourage, you don't get so far ahead of this like a new kid in a candy store, because it's going to change, and you invest too much money in it. It's going to change on you than what was, worth a X number of dollar investment now is going to be maybe worthless 3-6 months from now. So therefore, you want to know enough to be in the wave and not be ahead or behind it.
Yes, completely. We're in a time right now where we have technology now that 6 months ago wouldn't have been possible, and there's definitely some level of push and pull that we have to we have to be careful with.
Yep.
So Mark, for people that want to learn more from you, follow your work, or reach out, where's the best place for them to go?
Well, they can always listen to my podcast. It's called Remodeling Mastery with Mark G. Richardson. There's about 300 episodes, so there's a lot of different topics going back for many, many, many years. That's probably the best source. I write for Professional Remodeler. I wrote for Remodeling Magazine. Just searching. I've written quite a few. I've written 5 books on different business related things. How fit is your business, which takes a reader through the fitness of their business with kind of a business type cholesterol, blood pressure checks, and then a prescription of how to improve. A lot of different topics and things, and you can tap into those. It's very easy and certainly very inexpensive to tap into some of those insights.
Amazing. Mark, well, this was great. Really appreciate your time and your willingness to share all your knowledge, especially with an age of AI that's everything is changing every few months. I know that people listening will get a lot out of this.
Wonderful.